Good morning, everyone. My name is Marie Nisus, and I'm the president of CCEA. Thank you for being with us this morning. Clearly, we saw the news that broke just like you did yesterday. And one thing I want to say before I hand it over to our executive director is the timing is very suspicious. I believe that there's a scandal brewing, and I believe it's based on our pending litigation against Dr. Jara. And I will address that after John addresses all of you. So thank you for being here.
So thanks, folks. I want to give some context to what we're about to share today. You know, January of 2023, our organization came out publicly and said that the school district needed new leadership, that we said that Dr. Jara's time had come and gone, and that there was enough evidence of over 5 years of his leadership that demonstrated that it was a failure. We had embraced and worked with this superintendent when he was first hired. We gave him the benefit of the doubt. During the pandemic, very challenging period for our 300 and some odd thousand kids, let alone the 40,000 employees, that there were moments of instability we saw on the Board of Trustees, and there was an attempted, what we would call coup d'etat, that failed. He was fired and then rehired. And at that moment, we thought the worst thing that could happen in the school district, particularly during a pandemic, was a change in leadership with an unstable Board of Trustees. So here we are, and it's February of 2024. And before we came out publicly in January of 2023 that we wanted new leadership, we sat down and had a conversation not once but twice with the superintendent. And we also had conversations with the 4 trustees that are currently controlling these Board of Trustees. Our conversations with the superintendent and with the trustees was the same. It was, we're not going in the right direction. We're not showing the type of improvement we need to do. We can't use the pandemic as an excuse anymore. And $1.5 billion of ESSER money, as well as another over $1 billion that would be coming into the school district with the upcoming 2023 legislative session, demonstrates that we have to produce better results in these classrooms, and it starts with leadership. And we asked the superintendent at that time, and we asked the 4 trustees that control his employment what they would do different. And the answer we got from them was they didn't think there was anything wrong. They thought they were going in the right direction. So that's when we went public in January, and we said it's time for new leadership. Now, some folks, question why we did that during or about, the beginning of a legislative session, but more important, when we were going to negotiate a new contract. Some people thought it was kind of crazy for us to do it because why would you want to bargain a contract with your employer who you're asking to be fired, right? And we knew that it was in the best interest of the public and students and our public education system that a change in leadership had to take place. And so we took the position that we did. And I think we've been validated since then. What is about to happen next Wednesday is not simply a narrative of a bad actor. In other words, a failed superintendent. There's something more systemic that's wrong with this school district. And now the attention shifts to these trustees who, on the one hand, have enabled this bad leadership, but on the other hand, they're on the eve of cutting a deal that's going to pay this guy a lot of money and not going to hold him accountable for things that we think are grounds for his discharge. And the public should be very alarmed having these 4 trustees empowered with determining who the next superintendent is going to be for our Clark County School District. What they've posted as a replacement, Marie will speak to, but we think it's a continuation of the same leadership. And so we're going to share with you today the steps that we're going to take to essentially derail this deal, as well as make sure that the school district is on the path and bringing in the right kind of leadership. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Marie.
Thank you. So I started with the comment that he should be terminated for cause. And what's suspicious about the timing of this is February 5th is the deadline for the superintendent's attorney to hand over his Twitter account. We believe that that information would be vital for the trustees. And then yet on February 7th, they're considering buying him out. We do not believe he should be bought out. We believe that they should wait for the evidence that would prove that Superintendent Jara did put out that misogynistic tweet. And we are also suspicious of the burner account, the Luis account, where that account continually attacked any of the political enemies that are viewed by Jara as political enemies. And it continually put out vile information, and anything that anyone said against Superintendent Jara, this account would go after him. So we believe that through the burner account and the superintendent's account, that would be cause for termination. I do not believe for 1 second that his account was hacked. So moving forward, what does that mean for all of us? We believe that the lawsuit will prove to the trustees, because I reached out initially to President Garcia Morales as well as all the trustees over my concern about this comment. And basically I was brushed aside and I was told that the superintendent claimed that it was hacked, and that was it. I do not believe for one moment that a true investigation was done by those trustees. The trustees should not buy him out. When you think about the fact that he's looking for close to $500,000 in a payout, that money could be better spent elsewhere. And I'll bring you an example of Superintendent Jara's failed leadership. Our students have been in crisis the entire time he has been here. Our district is moving in the wrong direction. Under his leadership, we have not moved the needle where we should. And right now, our social workers are about to be cut because of the lack of planning for Superintendent Jara. The ESSER account money is ending, but yet there was no plan in place to ensure that our most needy kids who are in crisis, who need mental health services, will have that provided to them. Our social workers are very much needed in each and every one of our schools because our students are in crisis. So we believe that the money that could be spent on buying out Superintendent Jara could pay for 4 to 6 social workers for at least 1 year. To me, that's a vital need in the community, and our students need that. As well as I'd like to talk about the proposal that they're putting on the table for appointing Dr. Larson Mitchell as the next superintendent. While we were in during COVID and other situations, we continually met with the superintendent as well as Dr. Larson Mitchell to go over issues that were happening. Under their failed leadership, because that's how I view it, it's a continuation of Superintendent Jara's failed leadership. She worked closely hand in hand with him. We would meet with him. We had educators meet with them on a regular basis to come up with ideas and solutions to their failed policies. Every time they would roll something out, whether it was pertaining to curriculum or their failed grading policy, our educators were upset because they saw it front line what was happening. So we asked Dr. Larson Mitchell to meet with a group of educators where they could share their concerns as to why these policies put in place may sound good at a high level, but when they're implemented in the classroom, they don't come out that way. But it fell on deaf ears. She was very adamant that everything that she was putting forward was going to work. Well, the needle is not moving in the right direction. So I really feel that this lands at Dr. Larson Mitchell's feet. So how do we improve this? We need to make sure that the community has input. We need to make sure that educators as well as the community has a say in who the next superintendent is. We cannot continue this same failed system that we've had in place. That means we have to put more accountability on our trustees, meaning that they need to have minimum qualifications to be a trustee. You are in charge of the 5th largest school district in the nation, and what they've proven time and time again is they are not able to do the job. The 4 trustees that continue to be his rubber stamp are a prime example of that. And we expect to see a change for the better. And so if that means we have to do that through a legislative process, then that's what we will do. So I'll hand it back over to Jara.
So we believe very strongly that elected leaders in the community should be involved in what's about to transpire on February 7th. We do not have any confidence that these trustees have the capacity to make the right decision and bring in the right leadership for our school district. So with that said, we're asking that the governor and the legislative leadership pay close attention to what's going on. We would not rule out requesting a special session if things go south and the wrong decisions are made. As Marie said, we are not interested in a continued administrative leadership here that's going to produce the same results, but we believe the community supports us as well. Furthermore, we are going to be introducing legislation in this upcoming session that is going to advance student achievement. And there's 7 components to what we're going to do, and part of it is based on the narrative we've seen play out down here in Clark County in the last year plus. So the first thing is we think there's a structural disconnect between what is passed at the state and then what happens at the local education agency, a school district. And so what do we mean by a structural disconnect? We believe that there needs to be immediate intervention in real time on the part of the state if a school district is going rogue or not implementing laws that were passed or using funding intended for the purposes that they were passed for. That's the first priority. The second is, if you look at all 17 school district superintendents, you will see they're all over the map in terms of what their qualifications are. Currently, the state of Nevada has no minimum standard of qualifications as to what should be required for somebody to take the helm of a superintendent. So we're going to be proposing that there has to be a minimum standard of qualifications for somebody to be considered to be a superintendent. What would be some of those? Well, for one, they have to have some kind of educational background. 2, they have to have some experience managing a large delivery system, an operational system. They have to have some kind of financial acumen. They also have to be able to have people skills to build relationships with stakeholders within the system as well as within the community. So that's the second thing that we're asking for in this upcoming session. The third thing, and this just recently played out, is we're going to modify AB 175, or clearly we're going to be supporting efforts to do that, to allow these 4 new appointed trustees the right to vote. If you look at the educational experience of these 4 appointees compared to the 7 board members that are on the board, they're more qualified than what those current members are. But more important, if you look at what these trustees tried to do to handcuff their ability to speak up by passing a motion that does not allow these trustees to make motions, it's just unacceptable. What are they hiding? Why don't they embrace that? We're going to make a change in that law. The next thing is, we've gone too long with the reorganization bill down here in Clark County where we've given autonomy at the local school site. And with autonomy, there has to be more accountability. So these principals that have authority in these schools have to be held to a higher standard for outcome. Kids got to learn how to read, and they have to learn how to write. They have to learn how to do math. And we don't think that there's enough of a standard with these principals in these schools for high outcomes. The other thing that we're going to be pushing for that we think will improve student outcomes is there's got to be some kind of minimum baseline of a staff model in an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school in terms of what kind of staff do these students need in each one of these schools that's appropriate to advance their education. We're going to put an end to these high schools that have 9 assistant principals and yet have 9 shortages of classroom teachers. We're going to put an end to the fact that these caseloads for social workers, counselors, or school psychs are astronomical when these students are in greater need. So we're going to ask for a staff model as a requirement moving forward. We're also going to ask that educators be held to a higher standard of accountability in their performance and their practice. We have dumbed down the standard of what it takes to be licensed in this state to be in front of kids. And what that does is it doesn't just cause harm to students in terms of handicapping their education, but it's not fair to those accomplished educators that work very hard to make sure that our kids learn. So we're going to be asking for improvement in the evaluation process of educators where they have the support, the resources, and the accountability to improve their practice. And then finally, the last thing of 7 that we're going to advance is we need more instructional time in these classrooms and less time spent on non-instructional duties. We're going to ask that be increased so that these students have an opportunity to learn. So those are the things that we're going to advance legislatively. But back to the here and now. We believe that what's being proposed next Wednesday is not good for the school district or these kids. We believe it's a deal that's been cut by these 4 trustees and the superintendent. We believe it's based on the superintendent is going to be held accountable on a lawsuit that's going to expose him for engaging in very inappropriate behavior, as well as lying to the public and lying to these trustees. Grounds for discharge, termination. A buyout of $500,000 is unacceptable. A continuation of failed leadership is unacceptable. The process of hiring a new superintendent should first raise the standard of qualifications, as well as be transparent and create a wide network nationwide to try to find the right person. Those are the things that we're going to be advocating for. We believe that what is being proposed, again, is not good for our kids or the school district, and we'll take every effort that we can to make sure that the right decision is made. And finally, I'll end with the governor and legislative leadership, as well as the community, business leaders, and parents in particular, should be alarmed at the decision that's going to be made on February 7th, the way it's being framed right now by these 4 trustees. That concludes our press conference. We'll open up for any kind of questions.
You've mentioned 4 trustees that are presenting. Jara, you name them?
Garcia Morales, Lola Brooks, Bustamante Adams, and Katie Williams.
And then if not, Dr. Larson Mitchell, who should be the interim superintendent?
Well, I think the discussion should first and foremost be what kind of qualifications do we need at this moment, right? That then determines the type of potential applicants, whether it's in the interim from somebody in the inside or the outside. So we're not prepared to suggest a particular person, as much as we think for the first time there needs to be a discussion around what should be the minimum qualifications for somebody running the school district.
You were talking about just getting the community involved in helping decide who the next superintendent is. What would be the best format of kind of hearing from those people? Are there community meetings or some type of petition or, some questionnaire that goes out? Or what do you think would be the best way to hear from the community about who that next?
So the school board trustees, if you looked at their last meeting, they pay a significant amount of money to a consultant who keeps coming back to them saying, hey, go to the community, listen to the community, listen to parents, right? They don't do that. So first and foremost, they should open up this process and have community-wide meetings to share with people where things are at, where their students' educations are at, as well as the needs they need for leadership, which starts with a conversation of what type of leadership do we need now moving forward? What's the standard of qualification? And then get input from the community and get input from different sectors of the community. For example, there's not enough time spent in these schools in the urban core where we have our most challenging students that have the least amount of resources, that have the greatest need to increase their proficiencies. There's not enough effort to do an outreach to get feedback on their end. So our suggestion would be starting with transparency and opening up to community meetings.
You mentioned appointing Larson Mitchell would just be a continuation of Jara. Can you describe a little bit the relationship that you all had with Brenda Larson Mitchell?
So from the beginning, from Dr. Jara's tenure, Dr. Larson Mitchell was his second hand. And through that process, every time we had issues that came up, whether it was dealing with how COVID was handled or instructional issues, it was very clear that it fell on deaf ears. And so that was what the issue was for our educators. Just last night in our private member-only Facebook group, the educators were going ballistic over this idea that the trustees are going to appoint her as the next superintendent without any real process where there's community input, where there's educator input, where there is a process of interviewing for the best candidate, because they really feel that it will be much of the same. It will be a continued example of failed leadership. The instruction, that's what she was in charge of. That's what she was over. And so the process of making sure our students make those gains, if you're not listening to whether it's your administrators or support professionals or educators who are boots on the ground actually implementing these policies, then you are not going to be a good leader.
Was there anyone there that y'all, anyone in the administration currently, whether Mike Barton or a few of the other people there that you feel comfortable should be appointed as superintendent?
Right now, what we're concerned about is the lack of transparency for the trustees. That's what they continue to do is not be transparent with the public. And that's what's scary to me on this idea that they're going to buy him out, knowing that this case is pending, knowing that this on February 5th, it could prove exactly what we said all along. Because from the beginning, I said, if he's innocent, that should be easy to prove. But why has he been fighting this entire time to where we had to make sure that we took him to the extreme to make sure he gives us his account information? That tells me he's guilty.
Ideally for the union, is it better for them to, rather than do the buyout, this terminate his contract the day, or is it better for you to have it pushed back after that, after some time where this lawsuit is figured out?
Well, that's why I feel like it's suspicious, the timeline. The urgency to get this done immediately versus whether he should step down. He should do the decent thing. Under his failed leadership, he has brought CCSD in the wrong direction. And if he was a decent person, he would walk away rather than having a handout to be paid out for his failed leadership and his failed policies that he implemented while he was our superintendent.
Let me say one more thing. So he should be relieved of his duty immediately. This guy is checked out. The only thing that he's looking at is a checkbook, right? He's not looking at any further in terms of doing anything positive for the students here. So the trustees should not make the deal that they want or they're proposing. They should relieve him of his duty, whether by termination or ask him to resign, but he should be out of the picture at this point. That's CCA's position.
With that February 5th deadline, which is, the court afforded that, do you expect that those materials will be turned over at that time and you guys would make it public before then, or before the meeting on Thursday or Wednesday?
The burden is on school districts to comply with the court order in terms of the type of information they have to release, okay? So we'll wait and see first and foremost as to whether or not they're going to do that. When we initially requested that information, they balked. They said no. We had to go to court to enforce that. Now we're going to wait to see what kind of information. We suspect we're going to get something, and we don't have a problem sharing with the public if it's the things that we think validate the claim in our lawsuit.
Message do you have for parents? What can they do in this situation? What should they be doing?
They should be calling their trustees. They should attend this upcoming school board meeting. That's assuming if they do not agree with what's being proposed, a continuation of leadership that hasn't done good for their students, as well as $500,000 to a buyout to a guy, that has failed the school district here. They should speak up. Parents have greater influence and power than they realize, and we would advocate that they get involved. This is a moment. I mean, you got to ask yourself this. If there's any parent listening right now, you have to ask yourself this. Do you have trust and confidence in 4 trustees to put into the superintendent's position someone that would be remarkably better than the one that they enabled for 5.5 years? And if you have that confidence, then you don't have nothing to worry about. But if you can't answer that and say, I do not have to, you need to get involved and let these trustees to know about it.
Does CCA plan on being at the meeting, and in what capacity? Is it going to be something planned outside, or?
We'll be there and have omnipresence, inside, outside, engaged as well.
Ideally, what if the trustees don't approve what he's suggesting, right? Because he wants a new agreement, a third agreement. He wants them to vote on this third agreement, which allows him to leave. I think it's February 21st, something like that. What do you think the trustees should do if they vote against him leaving at the date he's proposing?
Terminate him. I mean, what he's asking the trustees to do is not honor his current contract. He's asking them to modify his current contract, to get a buyout on his terms. That's what he's doing. And the trustees have to have the courage to say no and terminate him or ask him to resign.
Have you spoken to the new trustees, the non-voting ones, and how they feel about Dr. Jara?
I think I'll let them speak for themselves. I think that all of them do not like the fact that a motion was passed that restricts their ability to raise a motion. And I think that they're very engaged. The last couple of trustee meetings where we've seen them engaged, I think they're taking their position serious. So I think they're taking this upcoming meeting serious, and I'll let them speak for themselves.
Do you think this just distracts a lot from what's going on with Jara and the trustees from like the real problem of education? I mean, the next day at the regular school board meeting, they're going to talk about chronic absenteeism, where it's like, nearly half the student body in Las Vegas high schools are chronically absent. You think that just takes away from getting kids on the right track?
Well, this guy's had 5.5 years to get people on the right track, and the only track he's on is a $500,000 payout right now. So, we've lost confidence in this governing body as well as this superintendent to be on the right track on any issue, whether it's chronic absenteeism or low proficiency rates, in reading and writing, particularly in the elementary levels. And so that's why we're advocating for changes, legislative changes. That's why we're suggesting that Governor Lombardo, Majority Leader Canizero, Speaker Yeager, please pay attention to what's going to happen next Wednesday, because we just made a huge investment off this last legislative session, $2.5 billion into K through 12, most of it coming down to this school district, and we just lost a whole school year for 300,000 kids. We didn't make improvements, and now it's going to bleed into next year, right, if the wrong decision is made with the wrong leadership.
They're asking for the governor and legislative leadership to watch this situation closely. What can they do to, can they step into this issue, or would it be, after the fact?
I think that's a question that can be directed to them. I know the kind of conversations that we have had. I think that these 7 trustees, these 4 in particular, are electeds. And I think that they should and could respond to other electeds, particularly ones that determine funding and legislation for K through 12.
Do you think you need to go outside the district to find someone else? Would you prefer someone outside, or?
First and foremost, somebody with the right qualifications, and we're not going to say we have a franchise on what those qualifications are. That's why we think there should be a robust policy discussion on what does our school district need. I think that's our starting point, and I think that we should cast a wide net.
Washoe was going to pay $100,000 to a firm to try and find somebody. Is that something you guys support, that kind of money?
We will support a search, whether it's nationwide or even beyond that, to find the right superintendent. Absolutely. And if there's a cost associated with that, obviously, we would clearly look at what that cost is, but we know that we would support resources for that effort.
You mentioned setting minimum qualifications for superintendents in the state, or, setting higher standards for teachers. Would that be in a form of a bill, the 2025 legislative session?
Yeah, the 7 points that we said that we're going to package in a piece of legislation called Advancing Student Achievement. The second point of that is in legislature, we want to see a law passed that requires every school district to have a standard minimum qualification for somebody to be a superintendent. Statewide, same qualification. 2, that the governing body that it hires that superintendent has to comply with that. And if they don't, there's intervention on the part of the state, whether it's the governor or legislature, to prevent the hiring of that person if they don't meet their qualifications. That's a piece of legislation we're going to advance.
Now, something that isn't clear is the reason for his departure. What have you heard?
I think what we've tried to share here is that there's a storm looming on this guy, right? He engaged in inappropriate behavior, and he tried to cover it up, and he lied, right? And that's what on social media with this Twitter account. If you look at just the last month or two, the type of stories that many of you are reporting, whether it's $150,000 for these junkets for recruiting teachers, in Miami Beach on the 4th of July or Hawaii on another holiday, that hasn't resulted in anybody being, recruited. And then there's no response. There's no accountability on the part of these trustees. There's no response to the community on that part. If you look at, this incident with these Durango students, and it took a year to get footage, and the message that the school district and the superintendent represented to the community of what that footage would say really didn't turn out to be the same thing. I mean, these are the things that are starting to break in the school district, these kind of stories. So I think it's at a point where and particularly with the one that we're involved in, that there's no return, that it's just going to get worse for this superintendent. So I think it's about one of these moments where he's looking for the exit. I think that's what's driving it.
Is a new superintendent the thing that the district needs to approve and move forward? Like, is that sort of the magic bullet that we all need right now?
So could you say that again?
Like, is the new superintendent the thing that you think will make the difference in the school district? Like, will that be the fix-all for all the problems?
No, we believe the 7 points that I raised, right? So it's not just a bad actor issue, right? We think what the last few years with the superintendent, particularly the last year and a half, has demonstrated to us is we need some reforms. So the first piece of reform is immediate intervention at the state level if a school district is going rogue on legislation or funding and not using it or implementing it for what it's intended. The second is minimum qualification. You can't hire somebody who was a gym coach to be the superintendent of the 5th largest school district in the country. And if you try, we're going to stop it. That's the second thing. The third thing is a standard in each and every one of these schools for student outcomes that hold these principals accountable for. Okay. The fourth thing is a model of staff for each school that has the appropriate human resources in each building for a student to learn. The fifth thing is having a higher standard of resources and accountability for our frontline educators so they improve their practice and our students learn better as a result of it. And then the last thing is finding more instructional time in a day for these kids. We believe that those pieces of legislation are really part of the solution, not just finding simply the right actor for the job. So I hope that helps. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys for coming.